नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवस्ति गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the movement that is famously known as the Hare Krishna movement. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was a very learned scholar and also one of the greatest devotees of his times. He had a photographic memory and he could memorize what he read just by going through any piece of material just once. He was a very great and pure Vaishnava, and he wanted to spread Vaishnavism throughout the world. So it was his idea to spread the Bhakti cult of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throughout the world. Though he was a very great scholar and a great Sanskrit Pandit, he also wanted to reach the very common man of his times, and he did that by means of small stories. He used to tell small stories so that even a common man can relate to the ideas that he was trying to preach. So he was a very compassionate Vaishnava, and he could not tolerate the sufferings of the ignorant humanity, and he wanted to give each and every living entity the gift of pure devotional service. So Upakyena Upadesha, or stories through examples, or instructive stories, or a collection of stories that Srila Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj used to talk about in his lectures. And we are going to see one or more stories every day. So let us see this story today. A simple villager picked up some English through listening. He memorized only a few English words such as yes, no, and very good. But he never attempted seriously to understand the application of these words in the proper context. He only knew that a sort of respect for an English speaking person could be attained by using those words in front of people. So there was a simple villager who didn't really understand English or know English, but he just picked up a word here and there and tried to show himself to be a good English speaker just to earn the respect of others. Once a few dacoits made a plan to commit a murder and then escape, making it look as if that villager had been the culprit. When the villager was brought to the law court, the judge asked him in Bengali, "Did you commit the murder?" So the judge understood that this guy probably did not know English, so he asked him in Bengali whether he committed the murder. But the foolish villager thought that if he could speak some English in front of the judge, then the judge might have great respect for him, considering him to be a follower of the Western culture, and thus he may be relieved from the allegation of murder. So he wanted to just show off before the judge. Contemplating thus, the villager replied to the judge, "Yes." So for the question, "Did you commit the murder?" The villager just replied, yes. He didn't know what yes actually meant. Then the judge asked, was there anyone else with you? And the villager replied, no. He didn't know what no meant. And then the judge asked, do you realize that you will have to go to jail? And now the villager thought that he should put forth his protest against such injustice by applying his last resort. In order to confirm that he was the perfect gentleman and that he did not commit the murder, he just told, very good. Then we know what happens to that villager. He was put into jail. So, what's the moral of the story? Even in the field of devotional service, many people often deliver a lot of scriptural quotes in a parrot-like fashion without proper understanding of the instructions, religious terminology, and the injunctions that they receive from the pure devotees. They simply hanker for respect from people in general. But eventually, their position becomes similar to that of the villager. In the case of the scriptural quotes and authoritative injunctions are not properly assimilated and digested, the righteous community never appreciates them. It's also not possible to be released from the clutches of Maya or illusion through some parrot-like verbiage. It's often observed in public meetings, assemblies, and popular mundane literature that so many men of letters of modern civilization deliver such ludicrous verbosity on the subjects of devotion, devotees, and the Supreme Lord. Pure devotees simply consider these deliberations similar to those of the villager mentioned above, who did not realize anything beyond yes, no, and very good. Those persons are ultimately destined to suffer imprisonment and the merciless clutches of Maya. So, this is a very simple story where a villager is trying to speak English without understanding a word of it. And what happens to him is he ends up in jail and he is punished. So, the purport is that there are so many people who try to talk as if they know things, but in reality, most men are fools because they have not come in contact with a real, sincere devotee of Lord Hari. So, let us examine this. People generally say so many things against the Vedic literature or the Vedic way of life. And if you really ask them, sir, do you have a good understanding of Vedanta? Have you read the Vedanta Sutra or any such thing? The true answer is no. But still they want to just challenge the Vedic authority without even knowing what Vedic authority is. So I had a friend who used to come to the temple and he used to just challenge the devotees with his so-called scientific knowledge. He used to say there is no such thing as a soul. Everything comes from combination of matter. That has been proved by modern science. Or he used to say that there is no such thing as God. It is just an imagination of the human mind and so forth. He just is a representative of the so-called leaders of the modern age who try to defy the soul, who try to defy God and so forth. But he unfortunately doesn't know that all these arguments have been nicely answered by the Vedanta. So during the time of Vedavyasa, there were so many other philosophical discussions that were happening among the sages of his time. So there were sages during his time who put forth some of the ideas that matter is the origin of life, and there is no such thing as God, and so forth. So these are all the Mimamsa philosophies. And he answered them all in his Vedanta Sutra. So there is no question in the world that has not been dealt with in the Vedic literature of Vedavyasa. But unfortunately, people do not know it, and they just raise their voice against Vedic literature even without knowing what Vedic literature is. And ultimate sufferer is the ignorers of the Vedas. So Krishna says about these people in the Bhagavad Gita also. When Arjuna tries to present himself as a very knowledgeable man, then Krishna says that you are talking like a Pandita, but you are a great fool. So Prabhupada used to say that Krishna told Arjuna that you are a fool number one, right? Because he really didn't know what is right and what is wrong, but he was trying to present to Krishna as if he was in good understanding of what is to be done and what is not to be done. So Krishna said that you are talking like a Pandita, but a real Pandita doesn't worry about who is dead and who is not. He is transcendental to the material conception of life. And then in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also speaks about all the so-called followers of religion or a thought process who really do not understand what real religion is. So yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadant paschitaha vedavadarata partha nanyadasditi vadinaha. So for most people, just living a happy, sense gratifying life is the aim of life. So they really don't know that beyond the senses is the mind, and beyond the mind is the intelligence, and beyond the intelligence is the spirit soul. They do not know that. So most people live like cats and dogs. But Vedanta tries to help human beings come up to the conception of the spiritual conception of life. So the first sutra of Vedanta is Atato Brahma Jignasa. That means let us now discuss Brahman, or let us become curious to understand what is Brahman. Unfortunately, most people, they just have a hearsay about Vedanta. They just attend a few lectures here, few lectures there, and they just try to concoct something within their own heads to understand what Vedanta is. And then they are misled. So to understand Vedanta, one has to hear from a qualified person very patiently and very clearly in a step-by-step way, and one has to analyze it very carefully to understand its real message. If one doesn't do it, then he is bound to be misled. So a humble person who wants to understand what Vedanta is guaranteed to understand Vedanta by the mercy of a qualified person. On the other hand, if the person is very proud and he wants to understand it on his own strength without the qualifications of humility and patience, then he is bound to be misled. So there are so many instances in the history of so many so-called Vedantists who think that they understand Vedanta, but they are against the principles of devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So Krishna very clearly says in the Bhagavad Gita that Sarveshu Vedeshu Ahameva Vedya Vedaischa Sarvair Ahameva Vedya Vedanta Krit Vedavit Yevachaham. So Krishna says that after you complete all your Vedic study, you must have become my devotee, because I am the aim of all the Vedas. So Krishna very clearly states that bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yasyasmi tattvataha. So in spite of Krishna repeatedly saying that Devotion to him is the ultimate understanding of Vedanta. The so-called Vedantists, they conclude so many different contaminated ideas, even though they have read the Vedanta. So, such people are definitely confused by the illusory potency of the Lord. Mogasha, Moga Karmana, Moga Jnana, Vichetasaha, Rakshasi Masurim Chaiva Prakritim, Mohinim Shuta. So they are all confused by their own misconceptions about Vedanta, and then they end up having demoniac ideas like I am God, or there is no God, or every one of us is God, or such ideas. So all these ideas are useless, because the reality is that the spirit soul is a subordinate to the supreme soul. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutas Sanatanaha. So Krishna says that each and every living entity is my part and parcel. And also in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Apareya mitastvanyam prakritim viddime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat. So Krishna very clearly says that I have two energies. One is the lower energy that is made up of earth, water, fire, air and ether. And there is the higher energy, the living entities that permeate the whole world. So without understanding Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam or the writings of the Alvars or writing of Ramanujacharya or Madhvacharya or the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or the teachings of the Goswamis or the teachings of Bhakti Vinod Thakur or Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj or Srila Prabhupada, people just pass comments about the Vedic knowledge or the Vedic scriptures. They either say that Vedic literature is man-made, or they say that Vedas were written by some Aryan nomads in some northern plain of India, or that it is Aryans were against the Dravidans, or this is just one another philosophy, or so many other misconceptions that haunt them, and they dig their own graves and they dig graves for others. So a fortunate person comes in contact with a bona fide authority on Vedic literature and he becomes saved. So Krishna says that a person who is not in touch with him, he cannot be peaceful, and a person who has no peace, he cannot be happy. Right? Ashantasya kutas sukham. So a person who is not a yogi, or a person who is not devotionally attached to the Supreme Lord, he cannot have any peace. And a person who is not peaceful, ashantasya kutas sukham. So a person who is not peaceful, how can he be happy? So all these Vedic literature are meant to give people the understanding about how to live their life peacefully and how to go back to Godhead. Right? The mystery of this world has been unraveled by the teachings of the Vedanta. But unfortunately, people don't have time, or people are having a lot of preconceptions, and this stops them from understanding and benefiting from Vedic literature. Thank you.